God bless America. Hello, everybody. I am the Talk Radio Protege. This is the Protege program. Thank you for joining me. I pointed out yesterday that there had been a school shooting in Florida. It was on my radar. I was aware that it was going on. And as I fully expected today, it was the number one story across media platforms. Drudge Report, it was the number one headline. The big bold letters were on their main headline that was talking about the FBI being alerted to the shooter before he had done the event. And I want to start out just giving you a brief explanation of what happened. So at 2:30 p.m. yesterday, a fire alarm goes off inside the school, and the shooter killed students and staff as they reacted to the fire alarm. Apparently, the shooter left the scene concealed among fleeing students, and he hid in a nearby neighborhood where he was later arrested without incident. And I want to show you some of the hot takes from the Twitter sphere. These are all recorded and reported by the Twitter aggregating website Twitchy. And I just want to give you some of my favorites that I've seen so far. The first from Chelsea Handler. We have to elect candidates that are not funded by the NRA in November. We have an opportunity to elect candidates who won't allow kids to go to school and get shot. It is disgusting how many times this has happened and Republicans do nothing. You all have blood on your hands. Now, I assume that she says that the Republicans have blood on their hands, but the way that she wrote the tweet where she's talking about electing people that are not the current batch of Republicans, she could be saying that the voters have blood on their hands, and I would kind of doubt that she actually meant to say that, but it could be misconstrued that way. Also notice there's no blame whatsoever in Chelsea Handler's heart for the shooter. In her mind, it would appear that the shooter is not at any fault whatsoever. In fact, if firearms weren't available, then this shooter would not have had ill feelings in his heart towards the people that he ended up shooting or towards the school that he attacked. He would have just been a cheerful, thriving young man, and he would have never shot up a school. Next, from Alyssa Milano. I'm not sure who this person is, but she has a message for NRA members. No more. And I imagine it going like this. No more. Not one more. We are screaming. No one is listening. Children are dying. NRA members, please demand safety, reform, and sensible #gun control. Put your foot down or this nightmare will never end. We need your help. Hold NRA leadership accountable. Now, I wonder what Alyssa Milano thinks that NRA members have that in terms of direct power to influence legislation, because there's no doubt that the NRA and its members are a very influential force when it comes to policy making. But nobody in the NRA has their hand in the cookie jar when it comes to gun legislation. In fact, there's a lot of gun legislation that the NRA wants to see changed that would absolutely change the outcomes of some of these school shootings. But we'll get to some more of that in a moment. Now, Trump tweeted that erratic behavior needs to be reported. The kind of erratic behavior that he had read and that he had heard the shooter was exhibiting. And the verified leftists said that Trump was victim blaming. But this individual, Matt McDermott, had a different take on Trump's tweet. As Trump tweets blame the victims for not reporting the shooter, BuzzFeed reports that the shooter actually was reported directly to Trump's own FBI months ago. And I think it's funny that that Matt would tweet this fact in this way, pointing out that it's Trump's FBI that failed to do anything about the shooter before the shooting occurred. Because all the other 365 days of the year, the FBI is supposed to be independent of Trump. There's not supposed to be anybody in the FBI pledging loyalty to Trump or anything like that. But today, the day after a school shooting, it's Trump's FBI, and if the FBI got something wrong, then Trump is directly and 100% responsible. You see the hypocrisy that comes from this. And then, I think this is the last one. I have one more. This individual is allegedly from the school, and in response to some of the tweets that have been going around, she tweeted, "I don't want your condolences, you blankety piece of blank. My friends and teachers were shot. Multiple of my fellow classmates are dead. Do something instead of sending prayers. Prayers won't fix this, but gun control, capital G gun control, will prevent it from happening again." We're going to talk about that as we continue, but first I want to address this last tweet here. This is from Stephen Miller. And if you go to Twitchy and see where these screen captures are coming from, I'm taking a mental note now to put the links to each of these stories in the description of the video. There's a laundry list of media people doing exactly what Stephen Miller said they were going to do. Media are going to put out stories about Trump overturning an Obama-era rule regarding mentally ill and guns with a wink wink. What they're not going to do is link it to Parkland. They're literally throwing out a shiny object, and it's why they are tuned out. And, Stephen Miller tweeted this, I would assume early this morning, and there is as I said, long list of media individuals that did exactly that. And I'm just going to fact check those media individuals for you real quick. The rule that Trump overturned was a rule regarding people that have somebody other than themselves sign for their Social Security checks. Those people are the people that were targeted by the Obama rule. Obama made a rule that said these people aren't allowed to buy guns. It was not a broad strokes mentally ill rule. It was a rule specifically for, and it may not have even just been Social Security checks. It may have been like VA level stuff. So you have veterans who might have a memory problem that have somebody not themselves sign for their benefit checks, and now they're not allowed to own weapons, according to the Obama-era rule. That's the rule that Trump overturned. That rule has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with this particular shooting incident. Now, all that being said, let's begin to think about, decompress, slow down, and analyze this shooting and what happened. If you're watching this video and you have some emotional connection to the gun control debate, to the gun lobby, to the pro-gun side of the debate, whatever. If you've been a victim of a shooting of any kind, if you've been involved in a school shooting in some way, I would ask simply that you make an attempt, because I know it would be difficult to do this, but make an attempt to imagine that that has not happened to you. Say that that's not you might say that's not a fair thing to ask of you, and I acknowledge that it is a difficult thing to ask, but make that attempt for me today. And let's think in very basic terms about this situation. Let's start by thinking about prevention, because that everybody in the immediate aftermath of this wants to prevent these kinds of events from happening in the future. And I know that especially the rank and file people that are talking about preventing these kinds of events in the future, I know that they have only one thing in mind, and that's the prevention of further harm. People, the average Joe or Jane or whoever takes to Twitter and tweets gun control now. They're not thinking control the population. They're thinking stop people from dying. And I accept that, and that is a benevolent thing. That's a good thing. That's a good sentiment to have in your heart. But by the same token, reacting in an emotional way to this is just as irrational as reacting in an emotional way to a car accident on the highway. Example, a mother has her son killed in a car accident and she says, "We must ban all vehicles and we must ban them now." Is that a rational and reasonable response to have to a car accident? If it's not, and you need to tell that, and if you feel the need to say to that mother, please try and detach yourself from the situation, then by the same token, I'm asking you, please try and detach yourself from the situation. Think with a cool head. Think, calculatedly. What measures were in place to prevent this shooting from happening? First of all, the shooter had to procure a weapon. He had to obtain a weapon. And according to a couple of sources now, namely Business Insider, the shooter purchased his firearm legally because he had no criminal background and no mental health history. Business Insider cites, I believe, some of the specific Florida laws that could have prevented him from purchasing this gun. Felony arrests, active warrants, illegal immigration status, any past convictions, or whether he had been declared mentally defective or involuntarily committed to an institution by a judge. Apparently, the shooter had not been through any of these channels, so he was able to legally purchase a firearm. We'll talk about a couple of other things as we move along, but there was no current legal law that would have prevented the shooter from purchasing the firearm. What was in place for him to have carried a weapon? What laws were in place that should have prevented the shooter from taking the weapon to the school? Well, schools in the United States of America have been gun-free zones since 1990. And obviously this did not stop the shooting from happening. So this law, the words on paper that say there shall be no firearms on school property, did not stop this shooting. A big issue when it comes to shootings like this was the person sufficiently mentally defective such that they should not have been allowed to purchase the gun? And so far, this person does not seem to have been mentally unstable in that capacity. He was a sick puppy, it looks like to me. Based on what I've seen so far, he was a really messed up guy, but not messed up in such a way that his constitutional rights should have been taken away from him. So he did not break any laws up until the point that he was killing people, besides, of course, the carrying of the firearm on school property, which, thus far as I know, there is nothing in place that enforces the gun-free zone besides the sign on school property. And that's a different issue which I will touch on as we go along. But he didn't break any other laws besides, of course, killing people and carrying a controlled substance onto school property. And this is not Minority Report. If you haven't seen Minority Report, the world of Minority Report is such that people were arrested because they were about to commit a crime, not because of any crime they had committed. And we don't convict people of crimes that they might commit or crimes that they're... Well, in some cases we do arrest people for crimes that they're going to commit. And that's in the extreme instance when people are going to commit crimes that are going to hurt a lot of people, and it requires a lot of evidence to prove that someone was going to commit a crime. And just owning weapons is not enough evidence to prove that a person is going to commit a crime. So even if the FBI had acted on information that they might have been given about this shooter, he would have had purchased things, and he would have said things that people thought pointed to him being a school shooter. That might not have been enough evidence for the FBI to act on. Now, the issues that are at play here, the macro issues that we need to talk about, is number one, the right to life. Because the victims of this shooting have a right to life. And their right to life has been violated by this individual. After an incident like this one, like I said, the objective of Honest Hearts is the preservation of life, and it's usually via preventing future attacks. They want to stop dangerous people from being able to purchase guns so that these attacks can be prevented in the future. And it would be a fantastic thing if words on paper, which is really, when you get down to it, when it comes down to someone breaking the law is just words on paper. And it would be lovely if those kinds of things, if words on paper would stop, full stop, all of these events. But we already have words on paper that should have stopped this event. The words on paper say you cannot carry a firearm onto a school campus. That should have stopped this shooter from doing exactly what he did, yet he did it anyway. The words on paper that we have in place right now are not stopping people. So the question becomes not, can we stop the shooting from happening on the school campus with laws, because we can't. The question is now, can we stop the perpetrator from getting the gun in the first place? Or, an alternative question is, can we teach the schools to stop the perpetrator? We'll talk more about that in a moment, but for now, the assumption, especially by those on the left, is that we can't teach schools to stop the perpetrator. Because if we do that, that accepts the premise that we can't get rid of the gun. And the left desperately, desperately wants to get rid of the gun. So the question is, can we keep the perpetrator from getting the gun? And so far, we haven't gotten to the place where we're willing to ask the question, can we just get rid of all of the guns? The people on the very fringe left are, but we're not willing to have a real debate over that question yet. The real debate is happening over, should we keep guns out of the hands of people that are quote-unquote dangerous? And I just want to say, in regards to that question, the reality of life dictates that the answer to that question is no. Let me explain. This shooter, the shooter in this incident, was undeniably a very sick puppy. Let me just skip ahead and point to the evidence that was presented to the FBI as this guy needs to be investigated. There was a comment left on a YouTube video by the ostensibly by the perpetrator. It's a YouTube account of the same name as the shooter. The shooter's name, Nicholas Cruz, a YouTube account named Nicholas Cruz, left a comment on a video that said, "I am going to be a professional school shooter." That looks scary. This guy might have been dangerous. I've seen reports that he affiliated himself with a white nationalist group in Florida. And of course, when you say the words white nationalism, everyone left of John McCain loses their minds, because those guys are sick puppies. They want to kill all the black people. They're very dangerous. And so this particular person had ideas that the public at large thinks of as bad ideas. But are we willing to make actionable the holding of quote-unquote bad ideas? Are we willing to say at this point in the country that if you have the wrong ideas, you're not allowed to own a firearm? And I say that because that's what it's going to take to keep guns out of the hands of quote-unquote dangerous people. Because if we pass a law that says dangerous people aren't allowed to own firearms, the reality of life dictates that someone eventually is going to attack a school and they will have had no actionable background. And the question is then going to become, why can't we just get rid of all of the guns? Exhibit A for someone is going to come along who's going to be a school shooter who will have no actionable background qualities. Stephen Paddock, the Las Vegas shooter. There has been, to this day, no mainstream media report telling us why Stephen Paddock was a shooter or why he shouldn't have been allowed to own those guns, besides nobody should own those guns. The reality is he had no actionable offenses in his background. He owned those guns. A few people, well, no, nobody was aware that he had as many guns as he had. Nobody was aware that he was as dangerous of a person as he turned out to be. And yet, he shot up a country music concert. Are we willing to say that we need to make actionable offenses the kinds of things that Stephen Paddock was doing in his life? Because if we are not, then we cannot keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people. Because dangerous people, the really dangerous people, the most dangerous people, you're not going to know that they're dangerous until they've shot up a school, until they've shot up a crowd. Now, given this, that you cannot stop the bad guy from getting his hands on the gun, short of mass confiscation of firearms, the more likely solution is arming the schools. But we're not willing to have that conversation. Nobody left of John McCain is willing to arm the schools because you can't put the children in that kind of situation. You can't make the children feel like they're going to a prison. School is supposed to be safe. We have to take all of the defensive measures out of school because we have to make it look safe. We can't have metal detectors in schools because we can't be treating kids like they're prisoners, like they're inmates, like they're gang members, like they're criminals. And that means you can't stop a criminal. If you don't treat anybody that doesn't belong at school like a criminal, then a criminal is going to wander onto school and he's going to shoot up the place. Now, when it comes to having defensive measures at school, I want to read you an excerpt from the project that I'm working on for this summer. This is going to be from a video on the right to life. The existence of the fundamental human right that is the right to life, necessitating the right to preservation of life, we must also acknowledge that a right exists to wield power, even when there is no immediate need. After all, it is the wielding of power that places the right of one to life in peril, And in those circumstances, in order to preserve life, a minimum of equal power must be wielded in return. The uncertainty of life means that power must also be readily available. Measures that hamper the availability of power increase the differential of power between an assailant and their victim. Think through an attack with me. An attacker is proactive. They decide what they will do. They pick their victim and they act. They may also take any actions that will hamper the victim in advance of attacking the victim. The victim, on the other hand, is reactive. They must ascertain what the assailant is doing. They must decide what they will do in response, and then they act. All quote-unquote preparatory actions that an assailant got to take in advance of attacking his victim, a victim must now take in the heat of combat. There is already a power differential because the victim must perform an additional action during the assault. That is, he must perceive the assault before he can act. Any restrictions, then, on the wielding of power that slow its brandishing, therefore disproportionately slow the victim of assault rather than perpetrators, and thus place life at greater risk rather than less. If that doesn't make sense to you, leave a comment. I would love to discuss that with you. The other issue that's at play here, and this one is much more difficult than the discussion of the right to life and wielding of power, and that is anonymity on the internet. Now, anonymity on the internet has allowed people to be much more open and honest than they are in face-to-face conversation. The reason for that, especially in light of some of the most recent political movements that we've been watching, especially over the past year, is obvious. If you say to a leftist something that a leftist finds offensive, and they decide, you're assaulting me, I'm going to punch you now, then you're not going to say those words to a leftist. On the other hand, if you're protected behind your screen, then you can say whatever you want. I can say all kinds of things that are provocative or politically incorrect from the safety of this interface that you and I have. And I don't face nearly as much danger from voicing my opinion as I do if I have to put my face and my name to it. Especially considering that I'm making no living from making these videos. But because of the nature of the alleged evidence that exists against the shooter in this situation, I would not be surprised if we were to see calls of all kinds coming to YouTube, to Google, to compel people to make their public or personally identifiable information, things that are protected from what's the word? Can't think of the word. That are protected from unwilling disclosure by law. Available so that the FBI can find out who is saying what things on YouTube. And this is dangerous for a few reasons. It's dangerous because it artificially suppresses speech by making it more dangerous to voice unpopular opinions. The other thing that it does is it puts in danger the innocent in this way. Now, there is no evidence that this Nicholas Cruz is the same person that shot up the school. And I take that back. There's circumstantial evidence. There's circumstantial evidence that this Nicholas Cruz is the person that shot up the school. Because their names match, and the person that posted, I'm going to be a professional school shooter, went on to shoot up it has the same name as the name of a guy that went to shoot up a school. But this could be a photoshopped image. I don't know that it is. I'm saying it could be. It could be a person who hates Nicholas Cruz that posted this comment to YouTube. It could be a different Nicholas Cruz entirely. There's potential that somebody put this quote out there and it's being unfairly attributed to the shooter of the Florida high school. I don't know the answer to that question. But making things like this an actionable offense could potentially cause innocent people to get swept up in these investigations and possibly even have their constitutional rights removed from them because of things that other people have done. This is a precipice that we could be standing on in terms of anonymity online. But that's going to do it for this video. We're probably going to be talking about other things when it comes to this event, because I have no doubt that there's going to be numerous things talked about this shooting tonight. I have no doubt that there's going to be things that are going to need to be debunked in the coming days. And just like with the Las Vegas shooting, we're probably going to have to talk more about this because it is such a high-profile case, because there is a delay in some people getting their voices out there, and there's probably going to be things that need to continue to be said regarding gun rights, regarding the right to self-preservation. Because when it comes to the right to bear arms, it's not about the carrying of weapons and being dangerous. It's about being powerful enough to preserve your life and to preserve the lives of others. That's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure that you leave a like, hit subscribe, hit the bell for notifications so that you don't miss a single update, a single video. I'll be back tomorrow for Friday's video, and then Monday I have the day off, but the news won't take the day off, so I'm not going to miss that video as well. I hope that you'll come back and join me. Until next time, good night, and God bless.